Welcome everyone to our webinar today. We're going to get started in about 1 minute. Okay, I am showing 2 o'clock Eastern time, so let's go ahead and get started. Once again, welcome to everyone who's coming into the webinar right now. My name is Patricia Julianell. I'm the Senior Strategist for Program Advancement and Legal Affairs at Schoolhouse Connection, and I am very pleased to be joined today by Attiana Virella-Fuentes, who's going to share with us some of her expertise and her tips and strategies. And then we'll have the opportunity for some questions from you all for her as well. And we'd love it if you would share some of your tips and strategies. I know we have a lot of experts on this webinar with us today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. There are no handouts for the webinar today. We're just going to have a conversation with Attiana, but we are recording this and we will post this on our website in our archived webinar section. If you're having any trouble with audio, you can use your speakers on your computer, or if you click on the audio tab in your control panel, an option for phone connection will come up and you can dial the phone number that comes up there. So without further ado, Attiana, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. I wonder if you'd start us off just by introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and where you work.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. So yeah, my name is Attiana Virella-Fuentes. I'm the coordinator for the Adelante program of the Santa Fe Public School System. I am one of 11 people on our team, so I'm definitely not the lone soldier on our team doing the work that we do. We serve approximately 1,000 youths every year. Comprising of students and siblings, and happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to have a conversation.
Thank you for taking the time to join us. Let me dive right in with my questions. I have a few questions to get us started. In the meantime, also, everyone, please feel free to type your questions into the questions pane, and we will get to those in just a couple minutes. But let's get started. This is a question and an issue that I've been hearing from schools and districts all over the country, which is this problem of all of the students experiencing homelessness that have just kind of disappeared. You know, you don't know where they are. They never connected to distance learning. You haven't been able to get in touch with them. I know a lot of school districts are seeing their numbers really way down from last school year and even from the year before. So I'm wondering, what are you doing to find students that haven't connected or aren't attending in-person classes, and how are you doing that outreach to get to families and to youth?
Yeah, it absolutely is one of our, it's always a big issue, challenge for McKinney-Vento liaison, this identification of students who might be needing our services and support. At the beginning of the year, the first thing that we did was we reached out to all of the families that we served last year. And so we're just kind of casting as wide a net as possible by reaching out to those families from last year. Of course, being remote and having issues related to connectivity and technology, we definitely utilize the support of school-based staff. So we have counselors, the secretaries, registrars. Those are the folks that, you know, they're always kind of our first line of defense and connection. And so we wanted to reach out to those folks immediately to see, you know, because sometimes it's a matter of a student moved to a different district and that connection wasn't made between the McKinney-Vento liaisons. We also, you know, we're here in New Mexico. We have a large field of experienced liaisons, And, the state isn't that large in terms of the number of people. And so we reach out to McKinney-Vento liaisons across the state. If we happen to know if a student, was going back and forth between, say, Santa Fe and Albuquerque, which is something that occurs pretty regularly, we'll reach out to McKinney-Vento liaisons in a different city to see if perhaps that student was enrolled at that school. But like you said, the issue is national in terms of where did these students go, and so we really try to make the connection between people that we know were connected to the students, and see, and have a conversation to see if we can find a student where they might have gone. So.
Yeah, I think so much of this is about relationships. So I'm thinking about what you said about finding who has a connection with that student and working through them. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm wondering also if you have students who maybe haven't been connected to school, but then if you do find them, if you are able to track them down, how do you get them re-engaged? Once they've been out of school for a while, it can probably feel pretty hopeless to think about coming back in now in April and thinking, oh, am I going to get credits? Am I even going to be able to, advance to the next grade? How are you drawing students back in and keeping them motivated to attend?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a challenge that we face every year, and during a pandemic, it's been amplified. And so in order to get students re-engaged, we need to make sure that, just at the basic level, they have what they need for engagement. So, excuse me, if it's an issue with connectivity, we want to make sure that those students had access to technology, to the equipment that they need to participate in remote learning. Now, as things are starting to open back up, we want to get those students in who have had issues with engagement remotely. We want to make sure that they have access to transportation. So making sure that they're on one of the school buses that I've just recently started seeing rolling through town again. We've attempted to provide some incentives for those students, typically the older students who are in high school, some incentive-based engagement pilot program, and in terms of, maybe you can't commit to attending an entire day of school because you have other challenges. You have, older students typically have childcare duties. And so we want to make it worth their while. Obviously, we want to, intrinsic motivation is the best way to go, but the reality is that our students are facing so many challenges. And so we want to utilize non-traditional methods of engagement, so incentives, and we want to make sure that our students also know of rights that they have under McKinney-Vento in terms of receiving partial credit. I think oftentimes students think if, like you said, what's the point? It's April. Well, we can still recover some credits. We can work on getting partial credit for the year. And sometimes even just that shift in thinking and perspective can help students become more engaged. If they don't necessarily feel like the whole year is lost, we can definitely work to get some partial credit for our students. And like you said, just hook them back in, because even though this year might be, getting ready to be over, we want to get them involved and hooked into services because fall will be here before we know it.
Right. I'm so glad to hear you talk about partial credits. It's honestly one of my favorite resources from Schoolhouse Connection on our website is a partial credit tool. Yeah. And I can say that it's one of my favorites because I didn't write it. A really good friend of mine who's a school counselor wrote it because I know that can be tricky, but it's so important. And just a quick follow-up that somebody typed into the questions pane. We've got lots of questions coming in, which is great. But you mentioned incentives, and I'm wondering if you could tell us what, like more specifically, what kind of incentives are you using, and how are you paying for them if they're, if they're financial, if they have a cost?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the student. We really try and tailor incentives towards the student and their grade level and their developmental levels. We're fortunate that here in Santa Fe, there are a lot of philanthropic organizations that have given us a lot of freedom in terms of how we use some funding. And so we're able to use some funding in terms of getting gift cards for students if they succeed in attending all of their classes for a semester. Sometimes it's for a week. And so if it's a younger student, we can definitely tailor it towards, something that they might be interested in. Things are obviously a little bit more challenging during a pandemic, because some experience incentives that we might normally try and offer aren't necessarily available. But it's student based, and like I said, we're fortunate that we have some freedom in terms of how we use our funding.
That's great, thank you. And before I go on to my next question, someone actually typed an idea into the questions pane. And again, I encourage you all to share your strategies and your tips too, because we can all learn from each other. But someone's mentioning that they give credits to students for a certain amount of hours worked as well. And I've heard of school districts doing that, because so many of our students, our students are always working because they're always trying to meet their basic needs. But I know that now more than ever, because so many parents have lost their jobs in the service sector, that students sometimes are really the main breadwinners for their families right now. So finding ways to be able to be creative about getting them some school credit for the hours they're working, I think is just wonderful, and really kind of honors the kind of work and struggles that our students are dealing with.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you about attendance. And I know that you all have just gone to actual building opening now, but still I'm wondering, when you were distanced, how were you calculating attendance? Did you have flexibilities in place for students experiencing homelessness who really just can't attend all the time? And even now that you're going to buildings, like you said, a lot of your students are doing childcare. They have a lot of responsibilities because of the pandemic. How are you working attendance, and what do you have in place to try to meet some of these challenges?
Yes, so attendance has, it's an issue in regular times, and especially during pandemic. Our particular school district allows for different school sites to have some flexibility in terms of how they calculate attendance. For the most part, though, the schools will determine if a student attended a full day based on, especially for the older students, how many classes they logged in during that day. So typically, if they've attended or logged in for more than half of the day at least, then they'll get credit for the attendance for the full day. For the younger students, because typically they're not seeing different teachers throughout the day, it's a little bit easier to gauge whether or not a student is there or not, because you have one teacher who's seeing those students all day long. And we always try, if a teacher or administrator reaches out to us because they have attendance concerns, we try to make sure that that student first and foremost has what they need to attend school. Of course, there's always the issue of motivation and desire to log in, but we want to make sure that those barriers aren't what's holding the student back. So we want to make sure that the internet is accessible. If a family's living doubled up and all of the students are trying to connect on one hotspot, you can imagine the issues of connectivity there. And so we definitely have flexibility. We have our liaisons have really great communication with all of our schools, and we really try and work to find the solution and not penalize our students for things that are beyond their control. This last school year was an experiment for everyone, and we're really trying to allow for flexibility between the school sites and the students, and make the appropriate connections when needed.
Yeah, when we were chatting before we went live on the webinar, you used an expression that really resonated with me. You said, we need to find some grace, because we're all dealing with a lot more is coming. And I think our students, our parents need grace, and our school staff as well, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let me ask you about who is helping you out. So, I mean, you talked a lot about who you work with within the district, the registrars, secretaries, counselors, teachers. What about in the broader community? Who are you partnering with to help you engage students, outreach, connect, et cetera?
Yeah, we're fortunate in Santa Fe that, per capita, we have a large amount of nonprofits and organizations that we collaborate with on a regular basis. One of the main ones is Communities in Schools. We definitely do a lot of work of engagement with them. So we have communities in schools. We have probably whenever this question comes up, it's always an unlikely answer, but the water company, because when families aren't able to pay for their utilities, because our program in particular has been in existence for a good number of years now. We're known in the community. People know what we do. And we get a lot of referrals that way. And so we're able to, if a family is struggling with rent or utilities, that's definitely the way that we get them involved in our program. And so we might help them pay utility, but then, we might recognize that then they're also having issues with their internet. And, if families don't know about their rights, and about the supports that they can receive, then they can't get help. And so we really utilize the various nonprofits in town, the utility companies, the different mobile home parks in Santa Fe are really critical points of contact for us to get families and students enrolled in our program.
I love that idea about the water company. It makes me think of a number of school districts I talk to who partner really closely with their eviction courts and with their law enforcement agencies that actually process and execute evictions. But if you're working with the utility companies, you're getting earlier. You're being a little bit more preventive rather than reactive. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, let me give you my last question, and then we're going to go. We've got a great list of questions here in our questions box. So feel free to keep typing those in, and also feel free to type in your strategies because I'll read those out as well. But my last question for you, Attiana, is as you look towards the next school year, what are you afraid of? What are your biggest worries, and what strategies are you already starting to put in place to address those concerns?
Yes. So, those summer months are always a critical period of time. And it can either be a time to kind of supplement the education that's happened during that year, or, as I'm sure every other liaison can speak to, a time of education loss. So time spent out of school can be kind of can either make or break the following year. And so, coming up on these summer months, we want to make sure that any opportunities for summer school, for tutoring, for some sort of engagement, all of our students have been pretty disconnected this last year. And as a result, I think most especially their mental health has really kind of suffered. So we want to start making connections to build community, not just with us, but also with community supports. Because during those summer months when, they might just be kicking around, we want to get them back involved, get them back excited about getting into routines, attending school, and, talking about what this last year was like. I think we really need to allow for time and space for our students to kind of process this last year. Yes, lots of educational time might have been lost, but I think we really need to utilize this opportunity to build relationships, to build community, and kind of, heal from this last year. Because we can certainly talk all day about pencils and backpacks and school books, but we really need to attend to kind of the emotional space that our students have been holding for this last year. So, that's what we're going to be focusing on coming these summer months is building community and getting some supports in place for students' mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Mental health is definitely a big issue for everyone, and not something that we can just kind of forget or gloss over or feel like, everything's fine. We're back in school now. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work that way. So let me dive into our questions pane here. We've got lots of great questions coming in. Feel free to keep typing in your questions, keep typing in your strategies. So a couple of questions. You talked a lot about, the work you do with school staff to help you as part of your team and as part of your community building with your students. How do you get kind of school staff to buy into that? Because they're busy, they have their, regular jobs, right? And then you're saying, oh, also, by the way, help me do this outreach, help me do this and that. So how do you build that team with other school staff?
Yeah. So at the beginning of the year, we really try to attend any and all staff meetings that we can get into. We have 26 schools in the district. We try to get to as many school staff meetings as we can to provide just education. We want to make sure that teachers and school staff know that we're not just, we're not looking to add more work to their plate. We're looking to support the work that they're already doing. Before my work as coordinator of the program, I was a counselor at one of the high schools. And so I recognize the value in reaching out to folks to make the referral process as easy as possible. And so there's a quick one-page referral that they can fill in and email to us, and we'll follow up with them. I think the folks watching can all attest to just a tremendous amount of work that our teachers do. I have so much admiration and respect for our teachers and school-based staff. And so we want to make sure that they understand that the work that we're doing as McKinney-Vento liaisons is to support the work that they're doing. So, we're always trying to frame it. How can we help you help the student? Because at the end of the day, I know that that's always what is at the forefront of everybody's mind.
That's great. Thank you. Really good strategies. Kind of going back, you were talking about, when I asked you about engaging students, keeping them engaged, and you talked about trying to make sure that students' needs are met as almost one of the first steps to helping them engage in school. And so we have a question: what are some of the typical needs you're seeing? I mean, I guess typical is kind of a hard word. Maybe the most common needs you're seeing, the most common barriers, and how are they different now than they have been? You have lots of experience as a liaison. What's different this year?
Definitely issues with connectivity. We've been talking about moving towards a digital world for years and years. And I think this pandemic kind of highlighted the inequities that exist related to technology and the issues around remote learning. And so, those needs have definitely kind of been bumped up. We always have issues related to wanting to make sure that our students are stable in their housing. We provide wraparound services for our families. And so we have the capability and the funding from other sources aside from McKinney-Vento to assist with maintaining stable housing for our families. Because obviously if a family gets evicted from their house, it can be disastrous to the learning that the students might have been engaged in. So definitely issues around connectivity, internet, and issues of inequalities that exist for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you a break from questions for 1 second. I'm going to share a strategy that someone else typed in. This person has been using their after-school drop-in center as a place where students can earn seat time to make up for lack of attendance during distance learning, or I would guess it's probably even a place they can go to connect if they don't have good Wi-Fi wherever they're staying. So that is a great strategy. Thank you very much for sharing that. And now I have a question that I've actually heard from a number of places where school buildings are reopening. What I've been hearing and what this questioner is saying is that a lot of McKinney-Vento families are very hesitant to send their students back to in-person learning because they're worried about safety. Again, they might be staying in overcrowded conditions. They might be staying in places where, there's no way they could possibly quarantine. So they're really worried about safety issues. So is there something that you're doing to, I guess, first of all, make sure that your McKinney-Vento students are safe, but then also to kind of convince them that it's okay, it's safe to come back?
Yeah. I mean, McKinney-Vento parents that are covered under McKinney-Vento, those families, they're like every other family in terms of wanting to keep their kids safe. So obviously, first and foremost, recognizing that their concerns are valid, they're heard, and we want to make sure that our families have access to, vaccinations that are available. New Mexico has recently allowed for everyone over the age of 16 to be registered for a vaccine. And so we want to make sure that our families are aware, that they know how to access that registration. If there are issues related to transportation to get those vaccines, we want to work to rectify that. There are a lot of equity issues as it relates to vaccination programs across the country, access. And we want to make sure, simple things like making sure that the students have masks available, multiple masks, because kindergarten through 12th grade, misplaced masks are the new norm. And so we want to make sure that just simple things like having the necessary tools that they need to stay as safe as possible. And having conversations, those relationships that we've been building throughout the year are really important as we try to address some of these concerns with schools opening back up. It's on the mind of every parent, and our parents that we serve in McKinney-Vento are no different. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you said about making sure that we're not assuming that McKinney-Vento students and families have access to what's there. You might say, well, anyone can get the vaccine, anyone can get a mask, but that's not necessarily true that anyone can do it, because we know that certain populations are underserved, and we know that certain populations have been more affected with more deaths and more hospitalizations. So it's definitely a real issue. Let me share a couple of other strategies that came in the chat box, and then we'll get a final question or two for you. One person is talking about extending summer school and extended school year and making sure McKinney-Vento students can access that. I know Attiana mentioned that also. And creating resource teachers and counselors to help out with students who maybe need a little bit of extra. We have a person who has assembled a team that works on reaching out to students, and they just go down the contact list and just keep trying and trying until you can kind of get to someone. A couple of people are asking about this recording. This will be made available on our website under our archived webinars page, so you can access that. And someone is interested in your one-page referral form, Attiana. Is that something that you'd be interested in sharing with me, and then I could send it back out?
Absolutely.
Okay, I love it when we can share materials like that, so we'll make sure you get that referral form. So this is kind of going back to your collaboration question, and it kind of goes back to the attendance and the credits as well. What do you say to staff who maybe have a no excuses or a policy about attendance or about coming to school? How do you explain to them some of the particular challenges that McKinney-Vento students are facing that really make their situation different?
Yes, it's definitely an issue that comes up. I'm fortunate in that usually it's just a matter of education. More often than not, once a teacher understands the particular challenges that our students are facing, they can work with the student in a more flexible manner. Of course, we have the law on our side in terms of in terms of what penalties can or cannot be levied against our students. And so we want to make sure we go in curious, we go in assuming best intent. But in the end, we want to make sure that that school staff and teachers understand that We're working to make sure that schools stay in compliance with the federal law. And so I go in softly and with curiosity. But in the end, I think as McKinney-Vento liaisons, if push comes to shove, we always kind of lean on the federal law that we're tasked to uphold. So.
Absolutely. I am going to throw out, we're almost at time, but I'm going to throw out one more question for you because I can. Nobody's going to stop me.
Yeah.
And it's a question that a couple of people have asked. So first, saying just one other strategy that somebody else shared in the box here. Our school has an after-school team who goes out to the community and knocks on our families' doors to offer support. And I've heard that a lot, that it really is coming down to pounding the pavement and knocking on doors to try to find a lot of students and families.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's cool that you're doing that. But the question I have for you, because a couple of people have asked, what would you say is like step number 1 and step number 2 for a liaison who wants to build a relationship with their utility companies like you've done? How do you start that?
It helps that we pay the bills. And so because Adelante has existed for such a long time, we have access to funds to pay the bills that are overdue. And so I definitely every fall I leave brochures, I put up the posters, I talk to employees at the different utilities, letting them know that we're here to help families pay any debts that they owe. And once that connection is made, it's kind of a no-brainer for them. It's to their benefit to refer families to us. And it's been such a huge source of connection and referrals in the community that I definitely recommend folks kind of take a minute, reach out, even if you're not going into offices right now, make a phone call. You can certainly email information for them to make those connections with your particular organization.
If you pay them, they will come, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and I'm making a joke, but I mean, really, any kind of collaboration is about that, right? What can we each bring to the table to make this work for both of us? And of course, ultimately, it's about the families and students. So you are getting lots of thanks and praise here in the questions box. So thank you so much, Attiana Virella-Fuentes, for being with us here today. What I will do is I will send a follow-up email to all the attendees, and I'll include Attiana's referral form that a couple of people have asked for. I'll also include some resources. There are a lot of questions that we couldn't get to because people were really interested in everything you had to say, Attiana. So I will provide some resources that will hopefully help with some of the unanswered questions in that follow-up email that I send out probably next week. But for now, I want to thank everyone for your time. I want to thank you for your questions and your great strategies and ideas. And most particularly, Attiana, thank you for being with us today and being just a fantastic guest on my show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for doing the good work. Appreciate it.
Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.